Okay, welcome everyone. This is the first session of OAUTH, so please take a seat and let's get going. We have a packed agenda as usual. So this is the Note Well. Hopefully you've seen this before. This governs everything that we do at the IETF, so if you're not familiar with it, please make sure you get familiar with it. Please be respectful to your peers and colleagues and be professional during any discussion. Meeting tips, you've probably seen this. I'm going to skip it, so let's get going. A quick update, we published RFC 9728. Congrats to Mike, Phil, and Aaron and our group. Yes, exactly. We have two documents in the RFC editor queue, SDJOT and browser-based apps. That's great too. That's great work there. And we have two drafts waiting for write-ups. I think we started kind of trying to push those. Hopefully, in the coming few weeks, we'll push those to the IESG. I don't see Deb here. Is she here?
Yep. For the cross-device flows, you've seen the emails on the list. So we're just doing a little bit of fine-tuning with beta, and then I think by the end of this week, you will see the write-up being posted and also the document forwarded to the ISG.
Awesome, thank you. So this is our agenda for today. It's a long agenda, but we have a tweak. We have a special guest this morning with Jonathan, just giving a 5 minutes update on AI agent authentication problems. And after that, the agenda is exactly what we published already. And just a reminder, we have a Friday session tomorrow too. That's the last session, okay? So that's our agenda. Let's get going. I'm gonna stop sharing and give the floor to Jonathan.
And I'm also joined by Pat White, who's my co-author on this. So I think, so I'm Jonathan Rosenberg from Five9. Many of you may not know me. I'm not really an OAuth person, although more in the SIP community and other stuff. But we're working on AI. We submitted this draft. I don't want to go through the protocol. I only have 5 minutes. It's sort of a request for help from the OAuth community that new problems are starting to arise related to AI and AI agents that we would like assistance from the OAuth community to solve. So I'll talk about the first problem, and then I'll hand it to Pat for the second problem. So one of the problems is if you look at how today voice bots and chat bots, especially for customer support, like if you go to a website, your little chat bot shows up and you start chatting with it, or you call up 1-800, what have you, and you start talking to someone, an AI bot for customer support. Those applications take actions on your behalf as you're conversing with them. So if you're talking to a healthcare bot and you order a prescription refill, it's going to invoke APIs on a back-end system in the pharmacy's IT department to refill your prescription. Today, most of those things are built with service accounts for those bots, which, as you all know, are usually, and they're pretty high privilege because they need to be able to operate on behalf of any user that might call the company. And so that's sort of well and fine because we've traditionally sort of programmed those and their behavior is somewhat structured and programmatic. We're now in the world switching to large language models to govern the behavior of those things. Large language models can often hallucinate, they make stuff up. And they are now giving them the ability to make decisions on invoking APIs. And so the core problem I'm trying to solve is how do we evolve the authorization framework for these things so that we no longer need to give them these godlike service tokens and just give them tokens that represent the user themselves. You might say, oh, that's pretty easy. It's just a pretty standard OAuth grant flows, take your pick. The hard case is when the user calls up over the PSTN. You've probably done this yourself. You identify yourself using some kind of personally identifying information. My last 4 digits of my social security number, my address, my zip code, my account number, balance of my account, what have you. This is what a human agent in a contact center would do also to verify you. And so we somehow have to find a way to use that information to get a user token and get away from these godlike service accounts. So that's problem number one. There's a proposal in the draft. It's probably wrong, so I apologize for that. I'm not an OAuth expert. Let me hand it to Pat to talk about problem two.
All right. Yeah, similar problem space here. Oh, Close. All right. Similar problem space here. The problem that we're looking at is really with autonomous running agents. So the OAuth flows that we know and love, look, and this, I'm also not a deep OAuth guy, although getting into AI, you get a lot deeper in it. So you have an autonomous running agent out there, say a trading bot that is entirely out there. It has no real UI. It might communicate with you through text. It might communicate through you with a Slack channel, something like that. That bot is running and making decisions. So maybe you grant it some blanket permissions. The ability to read your email, for instance, is a pretty good example. Like, I'm just, all right, this bot can read my email. But at certain times, it needs to actually escalate those permissions. And it doesn't necessarily have a very clear channel back to you to do it. So it decides, hey, this email came in from Pat's boss. I need to respond to this immediately. So the problem we're trying to think about is how do we escalate that token in a way that is not getting a God token? So the bot needs to basically be able to request a token of the appropriate permissions to do what they need to do. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. This could be over the top in the app. This could be an app request that gets a 401. This is where there's a lot of really interesting ways to deal with this. But essentially the bot needs to request, the agent needs to request some sort of escalation. That needs to get back to the user to approve for a limited amount of time, for a limited duration. And how you do that is sort of a very open question, I think, in the space.
And then the final thing I'll close with it for folks that may have pursued it. We had a couple side meetings on AI. One of the themes was a related security problem that is not quite authorization, but sure close to it, which is confirmation. And the problem here is that an AI agent wants to invoke an API, but the problem is we don't really trust it to do it well. We want them to confer with a human being. The human being approves the operation, and then the API can be invoked. I and Pat and Cullen Jennings just submitted a draft not less than 20 minutes ago. Draft Rosenberg check 00. So just call to attention for people who are interested in this very adjacent to OAuth problem on AI confirmation flows. That's all we had today.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Jeff, you have a comment, question?
Where did I post it? The bottom one, you mean? To the IETF.
So is it to the
I'll post on the I didn't post on the mailing list. I didn't put it in the OAuth group because it's not really OAuth. I'll send a link.
Okay, awesome. Jeff.
Okay, so my comment, Jeff Lombardo, AWS. So I made I answer to you onto the mailing list, and I've added the OAuth 2, and I think the love were because this is OAuth problem. When you said not giving God tokens, this is exactly what OAuth has been made for. I think what is inside MCP is already going into this direction and defining that. The only thing that miss is that your use case is super interesting because there is a ISVR channel, which the MCP does not go into the details of. So I think, I'm not sure this is a specific new specification you should track for, but an information draft for a specific use case to reuse everything that exists in order to be able to achieve it. Client-initiated back channel authorization was mentioned both in my response and the comment from Peter in the chat. So I think you should look into that.
All right, thank you.
Tim Capelli, on the last one, it is very much in scope. I actually would prefer we not continue to say it's off over there related. One example is we don't know yet from a legal standpoint if the original source data requires consent and authorization or it's the agent acting on behalf of that data. So it's very much in scope. We're also looking at this in FIDO and W3C as well.
Sorry, what's in scope?
The
check
human in the loop.
Oh, I see.
Is related.
Okay.
So I don't think it should be related. I think it should be directly a problem.
It's close. But I don't want to make presumptions about things. Thank you.
Okay, Yaron, you have a quick comment. I close the mic, but one quick comment here.
Yeah, thank you. Very quick. This is very interesting work. The one big thing that I'm missing is a separation between the agent and the authorization infrastructure. Ideally, an agent should not even be able to touch any token, not a godlike token, not a temporary token, no token, just names of tokens. Thank you.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I'll have to ponder that. All right, thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks, everyone.
Brian.
There's several site meetings on these AI-related things with lots of there are lots of security topics being brought up, so maybe worthwhile for you to check the slides that have been uploaded in case you missed the site meeting.
Brian, do you want to drive?
Yes, please.
Hold on. Try. Yeah.
Very good. Good. All right. Sorry,
So, okay.
the agenda change threw me off. All right, you want to?
Yeah, just I want to introduce this topic because we have an open issue that Brian will be talking about right now or in a few minutes, and we would like to get the feeling of the room or about this specific topic. So please pay attention, and we will take the official call, obviously, on the mailing list, but we would like to hear your thoughts on this here. Okay. Take it away.
Thanks, Rafat. Okay, SD.VC here in the OAUTH working group, for better or for worse. It's where it is, we're making progress on it, and I am here on behalf of my co-authors to discuss the document status and progress and so forth. So, welcome to Spain on Thursday. A quick review of what SD.VC is. It describes data formats as well as validation and processing rules to express verifiable credentials, sometimes also known as digital credentials or verifiable digital credentials or a lot of other names. Those with just regular old JSON payloads with and without selective disclosure based on the SD.JOT format. Uses SD.JOT and well-established JWT content rules and extensibility model as the basis for representing these credential things. It describes SD.VC issuer metadata and key resolution techniques, similar to those that you might be familiar with OpenID Connect. It describes some type metadata, so a way to describe the credential and its content in a metadata construct to help with, for example, in rendering UI to end user about what that credential is supposed to say and look like. It does not utilize the W3C's verifiable credentials data model 1.1.1 or 2. Despite the name, there's been a lot of confusion and discussion around that, but it doesn't require it, but it also does not prohibit such content. If you're interested in using them together, you might want to take a look at OpenID for verifiable presentations, SD.VC LD, because it describes how you could use them together. But this document itself does not delve into the VCDM from W3C. So some work's happened since Bangkok. We published drafts 9 and 10. And here's a listing of the changes. For the most part, these are minor editorial updates, fixes to things, fixes to the encoding and some examples to bring them in line with the actual specification. Describe some reasons for not using JSON pointer or JSON path in the type metadata constructs for, as requested actually by Aaron, just not changing anything, just describing some of the rationale for doing it. And we'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide, but we renamed this issuer signed JWT verification key validation section to a similarly, but maybe not quite as bad name of issuer signature mechanisms, and reworked a bunch of stuff accordingly. And the reason for that and what it brings in, this was done in draft 10 a few weeks back, published. What we did was clearly define an extension point for signature key validation options, which allows for a really concise definition of the signature mechanism and the key resolution and validation that comes along with that. This is all around the issuer signature, the main piece. Two common mechanisms were defined aimed at facilitating interoperability of those using and building on this specification. A web-based metadata resolution, there's a lot of words there. Let me try that again. A web-based metadata resolution using a well-known URI construct and a JWKS hosted at an HTTPS endpoint, and an inline X509 variant using the X5C JWS header. We included security and implementation considerations about both using each of these particular mechanisms, as well as what might be necessary to securely describe and profile your own extension mechanism if you are interested in doing so. This was sort of fixing a bug, I guess, in the prior specification, describing that the acceptable mechanisms for a given issuer are per verifier policy. So there was a lot of concern, disagreement, and real, frankly, a lot of ambiguity in the specification about what a verifier was required and or allowed to accept, and whether multiples were needed or what it means. But what we've tried to do here is make it very clear that the verifier has to have policy, local policy, that it's given, coded, configured, I don't know, it has it, similar to like a trusted CA list or something. That's policy about its sort of root of trust. And it has to enforce that and know that for a given issuer. So there's no way, no prescribed way to manipulate what the verifier might trust by the content of the message itself. There's these different ways to sign it and verify the signature, but the verifier has to have policy for any given issuer about what it finds acceptable. And then in the construct of that, we clarified that verifying one acceptable mechanism is necessary and sufficient for accepting the credential. There was a lot of ambiguity about that as well in the prior one. Hannes.
You used the root of trust here. Do you mean that trust anchor to verify the signature?
Yes.
Trust anchor. Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to draw an analogy to that like you have to have some kind of trust anchor. How you set that up will vary depending on your policy and which mechanism you're using, but ultimately you have to have some idea of how you anchor trust in your system when you're verifying a credential. And that is not described inline in the document. There's nothing, yeah, okay. As part of this construct, DID-based mechanisms are not explicitly provided in the content of this document, but can be defined in a profile or extension thereof. Just like any other extension construct, if you need a different mechanism for whatever reasons your ecosystem or deployment require, the extension mechanism is provided clearly, hopefully. The idea was to provide it clearly within the scope of the document, state what needs to be extended and how to do so, and provide that for any other ecosystems or constructs that might need to make their own extensions because for whatever reason, the ones that are here for interoperability are insufficient. So why did not DIDs? Thank you. I try. Get included as an explicit, again, they are not prohibited, but they are not included as an explicit mechanism within the scope of the document. Some of the main reasons are it's significant complexity and cognitive overhead for implementers and readers of the specifications. There's a proliferation of over 200 DID methods in their registry. And it's not reasonable implementation or implementable for most developers, really for most average developers, regular people like, I don't know, me, can't possibly implement all of those. So interoperability is, let's say, a bit elusive by just saying do DIDs. Profiles, again, can provide actionable implementation guidance, including how and which subset of those methods are meaningful and required in the context of that profile. Related, but in different words, there are interoperability concerns around this. The idea that you can just implement some of the DID methods and it's fine leads to not interoperable implementations. And really you need guidance to provide which, similar to the before, like which
methods are applicable to your use case, your environment. It needs more guidance that was really beyond the scope and expertise of this working group and the scope and expertise of the document itself. So specific profiles can choose which DIDS methods are required in their context and do so and describe them for interoperability, and policies around which are acceptable, which are required, so forth, all of which is necessary to achieve any kind of interoperability, but much too broad for scope of this particular document itself. So again, the extension point has been provided, it's available. Nothing that's been done here prohibits the use, but it defers the definition sufficient for interoperability to a profile or extension or whatever word you want to call it that describes the actual functionality required for implementation. Another reason it wasn't included here is what I'm liking to call reputational risk. There is potential damage to the credibility and perceived seriousness of a standards track IETF document through the inclusion of something like 200 poorly governed, not necessarily agreed upon by any broad set of specific community DID methods. And on behalf of myself, the document authors, and the working group itself, not to mention the entire IETF, I am aiming to produce a document here that is credible and can be taken seriously by those that are implementing it and reading it. And there is, like it or not, a non-significant portion of the community that will not see it as a serious piece of work when they encounter this kind of thing. What this means is applications, ecosystems, larger deployments using DIDs should extension, profile, or mention, even just refer to the specification to provide an appropriate issuer signature mechanism. That's now the not great name, but the name decided on for the extension construct. And that's available as it always has been. And this entire approach, I'm just going to remind everyone, has been discussed at IETF 121, 122, on the interim call, on the mailing list, and many other places. Reflect.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. So are you done with this? Like, I would like to specifically, okay.
Yeah.
So I would like to, first, is there anybody that has a question, comment about this specific issue at this point? Hank.
Hi, this is Hank. Brian is right.
Okay. Short and sweet. Okay. Somebody else.
Can the notes reflect that verbatim, please?
Go.
Mike Jones. So DIDs are not currently referenced from the specification or mentioned
That's correct.
at all, correctly? Let's keep it that way.
Thanks, Mike.
Andy Barlow. I agree fully. It seems the inclusion of this would just make it far more complex and confusing as an implementer who doesn't really work with DIDs ever. Thank you.
Okay. And I think it's clear that the way Brian is describing it, it is that it could be defined in an extension or a separate document. The question is, do we need to have it in this document specifically, or should we keep it separate? Leif.
Yeah, I also support this position, but I'll also mention that using X509s is in many cases, a perfectly good gateway technology, right? With Acme, for instance, it's not that hard to, you could profile the specification if you wanted to include your own trust framework. You could also use Acme to generate short-lived certificates and actually use the interoperable implementation that's already provided in the draft. So it's not really even a limitation, I would say.
And I'm channeling Nat here. He also agrees with this. So anybody disagrees with this decision? Joseph.
Sorry, I was in the queue before you asked if anybody was going to disagree, so I was just going to agree again. I mean, there was quite a good comment, I think, on like the first time this came up over a year ago from Gabe on the issue tracker, and he went through some of the issues with the way DID was currently profiled in the document, and I don't think any significant progress has been made on those issues since. So yeah, I fully support, let's do that in a separate document. Let's not hold up the main document whilst those things apparently very slowly get resolved.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the reason why we are discussing this here, bringing this up, because Rifat and I have been contacted by some fraction of the community who disagree with that. So obviously, like while it may not give you that impression in this room right now, but Marcus just joined the list of speakers. So it's definitely something we as chairs want to have a good discussion about, and then obviously confirm it on the list to have this finally resolved and move forward and be done with it.
Exactly. Stefan.
I just have one question, Brian. You just repeated what was discussed some months ago with pretty much the same justification. With the same justification, you kept the text from about DID in section 3.5. Now with the same justification, you deleted DID in section 3.5. This is a bit confusing to me, because exactly what you want to achieve in your on your slide, you also achieve while keeping the text of DID in section 3.5. May you please explain this a bit? Thank you.
I can try, yes. So I think there is a pretty important and subtle difference between that. Part of what I want to achieve is not burdening those reading the spec, consuming the spec with the cognitive overhead of something that is difficult to understand, perhaps reputationally fraught, whilst still allowing for it amongst the communities that might want it, but without explicitly attempting to describe, shall we say, the undescribable. And so the text that was removed was actually not sufficient. If you followed it, it didn't really work. So what we're doing here is still allowing for that, but accounting for the many concerns listed on here that, sorry, I'm struggling for the words, that are legitimate concerns of many.
I fully disagree, because exactly this part in section 3.5 described it further how to use, how it could be done, and was explicitly the subject which was requested to explain a bit further how the extension could be used. So I completely disagree to your statement, and I also disagree to the permanently repeated information about the 200 not standardized DID method as mentioned several times. There is a standardization project ongoing on the European level in JTC 19, where we explicitly standardize those DID methods. So this TS will be published by begin next year. So explicitly, your assumption is technique is from a standardization point wrong. So I disagree. But as I see a list of people here, I stop and give the ball to Marcus. Thank you.
I'll just jump in and say that perhaps that area where they're standardizing DID methods, I'm not super familiar with it, but that sounds like it might be an appropriate venue to provide this sort of profile or extension mechanism that we've been talking about here, because that seems like a more appropriate place then.
Okay, Marcus.
Yes, by my count, I think this is the 5th time that the group is now discussing the removal of DIDs. All 4 times before, there was significant objection to removing the DID support. There are a lot of comments, a lot of people who have been talking about their implementations, about their experience. Last time we discussed this, the editor simply removed that section against the working group consensus. There was then a decision that this change had to be reverted. We've seen pull requests with deceptive titles to try to hide and avoid the discussion. And I think it's still the same situation. We see, of course, there are some people who really want to remove that. We see, of course, maybe legitimate concerns about cognitive overhead, reputation, about this being tiresome, as Brian has called it before. But the fact is still that I think it's clear that there has been no consensus to remove this, and therefore this change should be reverted before it's being discussed.
Okay, thanks, Marcus. So maybe quick question to Marcus and Stefan. So the fact that this still allows you to extend that document and define the DIDs as you wish, do you think this is a proper way to kind of continue from here and not keep kind of rehashing this issue for a long time? That's not going to get us anywhere. So it seems like a reasonable way to do it. So I just want to get your thoughts on this one.
From my perspective, not. The section 3.5 was agreed, and I fully agree to Marcus. It should be kept until there is consensus, and I also disagree as the justification Brian gave. I completely understand it. Yeah, I think it's also understand your background why you come to this justification, but it's not true according to ongoing standardization works. We should not make a decision based on facts which are currently not true. So from my perspective, it's not sufficient, but maybe Marcus, you have another opinion. I'm not the only one.
Marcus?
Yeah, I think it's not sufficient. This has also been discussed. There are GitHub issues where those of us who want to support DIDs have explained that, and these issues have never really been addressed. We have discussed the question of the 200 DID methods. Of course, nobody wants to implement 200 methods. That's a bit misleading to have this discussion. At some point, support for DIDs was mandatory in the specification, right? Then the consensus was to make it optional, right? So if you're asking if the extensibility solves the concerns, then I will ask, why are there concerns about an optional feature that doesn't have to be implemented by those who find it too cognitively difficult? And others on the GitHub issues have also commented on their implementations and the value of having the optional feature in the specification itself and not in an extension.
Okay, thanks, Marcus. Oliver.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons the previous text on DIDs was removed because it was not sufficient enough for interoperability. That was one of the reasons it got removed. So what it takes to make it interoperable is to agree and define on which DID methods to use and how things like CNF and issuer keys are discovered and encoded. And in addition to that, to these DID methods, DIDs have additional extension points such as verification material, which they call verification material, which could be anything starting with JWKs and also multi-base, whereas multi-base is another layer of indefinite extensions by itself, right? So there's a lot of profiling work that needs to be done. And this just shows that there's a lot of effort and agreement needed to define such a profile. And why this should not happen in the OAuth working group, because it's not an OAuth concern. DIDs are not universally accepted in OAuth, and more appropriate venues exist, perhaps like the one that Stefan just mentioned.
just finish it. Tony. And we close the queue because we want to get to that question there. Sorry, Brent.
Tony Nadlin. So I hear this consensus thing, but following the list, consensus is not necessarily unanimity, right? I'm hearing just a few people saying that they don't want DID, that they want DIDs, but I look at the rest of the appendix, in the forums and stuff, and most people agree that this is out. I mean, they don't need it. So
Thanks.
I don't want to get caught on this consensus thing.
Thanks, Sonny.
Because I don't believe it's something that's viable.
Yeah. But
notable too, the
let's
consensus.
not go into those details, but in general, like we talked about this like over the years many times, that if the document authors of a working group document specifically on a contentious issues make changes, it better has sort of like been discussed in the group and there's a clear understanding of where we are going, because otherwise we just are going to have problems, like people come back to us and so on and so on. Like there's lots of unnecessary debates then and delays, which we don't want to have. So like keep that in mind, like nobody's going to argue about editorial changes with you, but if you suddenly rip out some content or add some content that is controversial, then it gets tricky. But having said that, we're going to do a poll. Rafat is going to add in the poll. Of course, we are going to repeat that and confirm that on a mailing list. So anyone who's not here right now in this meeting, dialed in from remote, can still voice their opinion. But we want to put an end to that story and want to know whether, how exactly is the phrasing?
Okay. Yeah. So the first question, and if we need to make it, maybe I'll ask another question. Should it be included in this document? So if you're in favor, please say yes. Otherwise, say no. Yes, I can.
Yes.
Let me take, hold on.
Run to the microphone and scan it.
I thought if I stop sharing because we have that thing running. So it's not.
It's good for you to move a lot around.
Mike, Dick.
No, it's attached to the. It's attached to the.
So use the guillotine.
Okay. I see that.
If you load the light meeting, there'll be a poll.
Okay. So I think you can see the answer here, right? So go ahead. Dave.
Yeah. We'll wait a few more seconds. And in the meanwhile, Deb, our security
No,
AD.
I'm gonna help you at the end of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here.
Okay. So
My job.
You're here to help.
I'm here to help. That's exactly right. That's what I've always said my whole career.
Okay. I think I don't see any more changes to the poll. Oh, maybe one more. Give it one more second.
It's pretty clear, actually.
Okay.
It's me. Just don't cream me.
Okay.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, gone. So
Just move it.
we
Yeah,
got
just move it.
7 yes,
Just don't-
40 no, and 9 no opinion. Okay. Deb.
I think that's clear. I mean, there is an option to write a profile.
Yep.
And so that option should be taken up by the proponents.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we don't have a limit on the number of RFCs you can have, right? So publish this RFC with what you have today, start a profile for the did work, and then publish that as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear, and I think it's pretty easy. I mean,
It was designed to be easy to write that profile. Hopefully it works out that way, but actually doing it might be a good test of whether or not it's easy, and that feedback could be provided back into this document if need be.
Right.
Okay.
And we can
needn't-
find out,
it
like we can
needn't-
make it easier, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it needn't happen in the IETF. It could, but doesn't have to.
Okay, perfect. Brian, we are way past our time, so thank you. But at least we got the resolution
Gary.
right now.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, Deb. Thank you. And just one comment before I let Mike take the stage here. I neglected to talk about, I mentioned that Joseph and Leif are taking notes. Thank you, gentlemen. And yeah, and hopefully they recorded that result of this. Okay. To Mike.
I'm Mike Jones. I'd like to, at this moment, acknowledge one of my former coworkers at Microsoft. The shiny monkey was a mascot which sat on Tony's monitor, remember monitors, and monitored our progress at Microsoft. And he's now here to ensure that Tony is on his best behavior because the shiny monkey is watching. With that, I'm here to talk about some work that I've done with Brian Campbell, Philip Skokin, Chuck Mortimer, and a number of the rest of you have contributed to updating the audience values for 7523 BIS, or for 7523 and friends.
Now you can.
So we talked about this a few times. We did an extensive presentation about this in Bangkok. This fixes a vulnerability exploiting ambiguous audience values intended for the authorization system. There's a pretty extensive description of the vulnerability and why it's possible in a number of OAuth specs that was presented in Bangkok. I am not going to repeat that here, but you can go find it easily. So the spec as currently written, despite having BIS in the title, now just updates for OAuth specifications. It does not replace any of them. They are in sequential order. 7521, the generic assertion framework. 7522, the SAML assertion framework. 7523, the JOT assertion framework. And 9126 for pushed authorization requests. So we had a strategy discussion at 122 in Bangkok about how many of what kinds of changes we were going to make. In the 00 draft, everything got changed to use a consistent audience value. Brian was an advocate for move fast and break fewer things. His viewpoint prevailed, and so that's what's in the document currently. And this is, other than the title, a slide that Brian wrote that advocated that position. Also, remember 00 replaced 7523 and updated a few other things. It was decided at 122 that we were going to rather just update 7523, describing deltas, not repeating the whole thing. So what's happened? Hi, Brian. You can come. You're welcome.
I wanted to explain the picture on that last slide, even though it's only tangentially relevant. Thank you. Early on in this work, the IESG had some critique of the language we had around audience. And I remember being called into a special meeting room to be told how inadequate the work was by the IESG at this lovely hotel in Orlando. So this is a picture of Orlando, and all of that is to say the IESG in their infinite wisdom was and is always right. And this was just homage to that. But there is a relation of this photograph to the topic of hand, and that was me being told years in advance that what I was doing would later be a problem. Thank you for your time.
So since we last met our heroes in Bangkok, we reworked the draft instead to not replace 7523, but just make some point updates to it. The semantics of 01 were exactly the same as 00, which was on purpose. And we removed updates to the signed JOT request format, because the signed JOT request format already said you should do the right thing. So we figured, all right, good enough. And we added a reference to the University of Stuttgart paper that describes the vulnerability. Some of you will recall all of this came about because we did a formal analysis of the last implementer's draft of the OpenID Federation specification. And their analysis did determine that there was an actionable vulnerability in the audience, or caused by the audience as specified. And once we really looked around, that touched about 9 specs, 5 of which we're talking about here. After 01, we then verified with Deb's help that the IESG was going to be good with this approach of having a spec that just said, change this section of 1, change these sections of 2, change these sections of 3, change these other sections of 4, rather than having full replacement documents. That went to the IESG list. They said, yeah, that's fine. So we proceeded along those lines. One of the people who invented one of the things in the draft was Philip Skokan. Stand up and be recognized, Philip.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Philip. The monkey thanks you. So we added him as an author. We applied the things that Brian suggested in Bangkok, and that's 02. People have been reading it. That's always a good thing for an IETF draft. They have filed issues, or we have filed them based on discussions. Some of those discussions have happened in the hallways and corridors here in Madrid. There's even a PR. And the next few slides will be a brief tourist overview of some open issues. So there's an interesting issue on explicit typing. Explicit typing was Philip's invention, not explicit typing, but using an explicit type here was Philip's invention in order to be able to have authorization servers tell whether you're using old 7523 or 7523 as updated. We currently say you must have the explicit type. Peter Castleman and Arndt and some others said, you may not always need this. And so there's a discussion. We're not going to discuss it here unless people desperately want to get to the microphone. There's an issue on SAML authorization grants and the particular language that we're using to describe the audience restrictions. Again, please participate in the issue. We currently say, which the FAPI2 final spec says, for instance, that the audience value must be a single string. Recall that in JOT, the audience is polymorphic. It can either be a single string or an array of strings. And we thought, if we're going to mandate a single audience, let's just keep parsing simpler and have it be a string. Well, it turns out that Kubernetes, you've heard of that, right? Has code that only uses an array for the audience value, even if it's a single valued array, and it would be a change to Kubernetes to adopt this. Some people think that's a bad thing. Discuss in the issue, please. There's some subtleties about the grant audience check, which is in the issue. There's a big catch-all issue titled Changes After Changes from One Morning in Bangkok. I will let you read the bulleted list in GitHub. Finally, in a blog post and LinkedIn post about this, I got a response from Mike Schwartz, the founder of Glue, some of you know, saying, I don't like the title. He made some suggestions. I made another suggestion. Brian made another suggestion. I think there's a lot of input that we don't have the ultimate title. We'll probably change it, provide feedback in the issue. So what do? We do the IETF thing. We keep discussing, we keep closing issues, we keep publishing drafts until we get to working group last call. Timely publication of this, given that this fixes a known actionable security vulnerability, is a goal. And when we were still keeping this under wraps and doing the responsible disclosure thing, we did talk about this with Deb and others in Dublin, the OAUTH chairs, and Roman, in fact. And they assured us that because this is a security fix, we could expedite certain aspects of the IETF process for this draft, but we have to have working group consensus that we're done first. So let's do that. With that, I will open the line to questions unless the chairs want to take the time away.
Yeah, we're out of time here, but anybody has any questions, quick questions, comments? Not Dick, oh no. Dick, go ahead. You have a question, comment? No, I was going to see if Tony had a question. Okay.
Tony the monkey wants to know.
Okay, awesome. Go ahead.
And maybe you accelerate the title discussion a little bit. So I think that's the least important part. And because back then when we met last time, there was a great sense of urgency. So we'll really get this done fast because we can barely ask the rest of the community to go through the process fast when we spent a long time on discussing the title.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
The monkey is watching.
Nice monkey. Okay.
For the record, it's Tony's monkey. I'm just the custodian.
Okay, let's switch gears. Pedram will take us and discuss update the security BCP. Take it away, Pedram.
Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if I got the presenter for the slides.
Now you can.
Yes, now it works. Thank you. So yes, we want to briefly talk about the status of the security BCP updates that Tim, Kai-Hwan, Adonis, and I are working on. So to give some background, we are updating the security BCP to include security considerations for 2 new attacks that we found after the BCP was finalized. And we discussed both of these attacks during the last OAuth security workshop. So one of them are the audience injection attacks, which are fixed by the update for 7523 that Mike just presented. And the other one are variants of the mix-up attack. We also had some discussions at the last IETF meeting about this, and the main results of the discussions were that the BCP update should only contain the new content. So that means to add a new RFC to BCP 240, and that this new RFC should really only contain considerations on the new attacks. And some feedback that we got back then was that we should do the update fast and start working on the document as soon as possible, which is what we did. So we have an initial version of the document, and today we want to give a brief overview of it. So I will give a very brief overview on the things related to audience injection attacks, because as Mike just mentioned, most of the things are already discussed during some IETF meetings. And then Kai-Huan will spend more time on the mix-up variants, describe the attacks, and also the mitigations for the BCP update. So regarding audience injection attacks, in the current draft, we give a detailed description of the attack. So that includes the attack setting and the requirements. And we also describe how the attacker can obtain a client authentication assertion, which it then can reuse to impersonate the client. And the description that we have in the current draft is somewhat independent of concrete endpoints, but we provide a list of example endpoints at which this can happen. For example, the push authorization endpoint or the device authorization endpoint. Then we describe some countermeasures, and we start by explaining the root cause for the attacks and why the attack can only be prevented by the client. And the countermeasures that we propose are using a single audience value, so not an array of values. And then the single value would either be the issuer identifier of the AS or the exact URI of the target endpoint of the assertion. So that was a very quick overview on the audience injection related things. And with that, I would like to hand over to Kai-Huan and the part related to the mix-up attacks.
You should have control now. We can't hear you.
You're muted.
You're muted. We still can't hear you. Nope. We can't hear you. Bedram, do you have other slides that you wanted to cover? Maybe we can get back to the other slide.
Not really. I think it would be best if Kai-Huan would be able to explain his part of the presentation. So there's nothing really from my side, except for some feedback and things related to that at the end.
Okay. Maybe give Kai-Huan a minute here.
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry for that. I'm really sorry for that. And thanks, Pedram, for the introduction. I'm Kai-Xian Luo, a PhD candidate at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and also a co-author of this draft. So I'm going to cover the mix-up attack variants part. So first of all, I want to briefly motivate why we think that we need a new draft for this. So basically, we found prevalent new mix-up attack variants almost everywhere, which impact Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Samsung, and a bunch of mainstream Chinese vendors as well. So the focus here is not on individual websites, but on the platforms that these vendors build. And we'll come back to that platform concept in a moment. So we found that these issues could partially attribute to the lack of clear standards or practices in the RFCs for these platform settings. And this is a joint work with my university and Samsung Research America, and with a research paper published in this link. So now back to the platform concept. So our focus is on platforms, especially what we call as integration platforms. So these are the platforms that want to build an all-in-one solution that would integrate lots of SaaS apps so that it could perform aggregated control and orchestration against these tools or integrations. So the worst case attack that we could launch is single-click account takeover of any apps integrated in the platform, which we have a CVSS 9.6 CVE with Microsoft that we could take over your Outlook emails and Azure Key Vault secrets in single click. So this urgency also lies in the fact that we found these problems recurring in new agentic AI ecosystems. Next, I'm going to briefly overview the mix-up attack in our variants. So the mix-up attack would happen in the case where an OAuth client could interact with multiple authorization servers, where one of them is malicious. And but instead of focusing on the scenario where there is one app or platform or website that could interact with multiple IDPs for single sign-on, which is the scenario that people often talk about when they mention mix-up attacks. Here, we focus on the platform scenario, which could integrate with many integrated apps. So here, the app concept refers to the authorization server and resource servers here. And inside this platform context, we found two new attack variants. One called cross-app OAuth account takeover, or COAT, which could leak a victim's authorization code to an attacker, or a Corf attack, which could inject an attacker's code into the victim. So these vulnerabilities stem from the fact that the OAuth client has ambiguities in differentiating the integrations or integrated apps. Specifically, it may rely on only the session or session-bound state or the redirect URI, which is flawed. Which is this is also similar to the context of mix-up attacks. And what's currently lacking in the RFC that we've discovered is that it lacks this platform context. This is important because these platforms are usually open ecosystems, which have an open marketplace that welcome many developers, all developers or end users to contribute. So anybody can publish a malicious app, and also so it's easier for a malicious authorization server to infiltrate. And it also brings up this concept of a shared issuer, because now two integrated apps can legitimately share the same authorization server. For example, there could be two Dropbox apps or integrations in one platform, potentially built by different developers. They have slightly different functionalities. For example, they may have different scopes or different API endpoints to call. But the key takeaway here is that, as you can see, the issuer identifier would no longer uniquely identify each integration. So based on this concept, we define the alternative.
Sorry, can I ask just a comment here? So I noticed you have 13 slides, and this is page 6, and we have 5 minutes to go. So maybe choose few out of those slides, and let's try to get some time at the end to summarize things and see if we can make some.
Sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. Actually, the last few slides are all backup slides, so I'll wrap up in like only 2 slides. Yeah, thank you. So the suggestion that we are, the fix that we are suggesting here is that the OAuth client should differentiate each integrated app or each integration with a distinct redirect URI. So the OAuth client would enforce that the app that starts the OAuth would be the same app that completes OAuth. As you can see here, the keyword here is app, but not AS or issuer, because the app is actually the actual isolation boundary, and it is the actual granularity that these platforms would use to differentiate each integration. And this defense has well received and adopted by many companies we helped fix. We introduced this defense as an alternative defense, so we use the keyword may in our draft without invalidating the existing approaches. So in our draft, we also resolved some comments from what we collected previously from Daniel Fatt, Guido Schmitz, and also Aaron. For example, the draft is now written in a more OAuth language tone, and because, say, the integrated app or app concept may be confusing. So we introduced this client configuration concept to better capture this integrated app concept. And we also added other clarifications and security recommendations over the current mix-up section of the published BCP. So to find out more about the details, you may refer to section 2.1 and section 2.3 of the individual draft. And the audience injection section is section 2.1. So the next item I want to discuss is about next steps. What more does it take to make it a working group draft? Are there any expected timeline that you want us to commit, or like what should be a better title? Currently, it's a placeholder, like it's an updates to security BCP, but I don't know if the title should be more tightly scoped to the attacks. And also, yeah, surely further reviews on the content are the most welcome. You may contact us directly through the IETF mailing list, or just leave a message as GitHub issues. So thank you. I want to leave the rest of the time for open discussions.
Excellent, thank you. Regarding the first few questions, Rif and I will have a conference call, sort of an offline discussion with you on these questions, because we, as all of you know, we try to attract new people in the group. So it's actually a encouragement for everyone new in this room as well, or on the remote, to participate and to help us work on documents. We have lots of documents and some of the authors are quite overloaded. So definitely appreciate new help. But we also, in the past, also had made sure that the expectations are understood, and the work style in the IETF also gets understood. So we try to have these conversations. And so we'll also have a discussion with you and the rest of the co-authors, but offline, because yeah, most people in the room know how this works. But
yeah, another suggestion that Hannes mentioned, I think maybe we need an interim meeting, a virtual interim meeting, to kind of dig deeper into those issues, so that this is something that we could also entertain and probably schedule somewhere before Montreal. Right? Okay, anybody has any questions, comments about this document so far?
Yeah, I've probably in preparation for such an interim meeting, so we got a few new pointers to papers and so on. I think people need to read them first to see what the different attack assumptions are and so on. So I think there's a little bit of preparation that needs to go into before we can actually have a meaningful discussion on any of this.
Yeah. And maybe we could go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I just want to say this is, I think, important update, and there's going to be more things that we're going to want to add to the document. So I think it's useful to have a bucket for collecting new security updates and best practices. I don't think it should be limited to what's in the current draft. So it seems like a good idea to open this up and just. I don't think that I don't think we should try to rush it through and close it off the way that we're doing with the audience vulnerability issue.
Mhm.
I think it'd be better to keep this one open for a little while to collect, more
Yeah,
more updates.
Yeah, like this is just the first time this document is being discussed, so nobody's trying to rush it to the ISG at this point. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else? Any other comments? So okay, please review the document, provide feedback, and be ready to participate in a virtual meeting, hopefully in before Montreal. Thank you, Kishwan,
Thank you.
and yeah, and Pedram. Okay, thank you. Who's next? I think that would be Mike or Yaron. Who's gonna be?
So this is, I'm Yaron Sheffer, good morning. This is joint work with Mike Jones and Dick Hart.
Okay, you have a clicker there.
And actually somewhat similar to the previous draft that was discussed. So RC 8725, the JOT BCP, JOT Security BCP, was published in February 2020. That was clearly the most newsworthy event of that month. Since then, there were some new attacks that were published in Black Hat, so summer of 2023. And then people from Tsinghua University went off, implemented some of them, some additional attacks, and published a bunch of CVEs. So there is a good number of new attacks on JOT in the wild. It's time to update the BCP. We already, the three of us already collected whatever attacks we know of. We scanned the literature, we read the CVEs, we collected them into 5 pull requests that I'm going to describe today. And that's already in version 01 that we published. So going through them quickly, there was no language in the draft about a bounds on the number of iterations for password-based key generation, which is one of the allowed ways to encrypt JOTs. So that's a very easy avenue for denial of service on the verifier. So this is one. Somewhat more interesting, the cases where an attacker would send a JWE and the verifier, which nominally would expect a JWS, still accepts it. In particular, in cases where this is publicly encrypted and where the verifier is keeping the public key along with the private key, so they're able to decrypt the JWE, and so that gets accepted happily by the verifier. So we're proposing to add normative language about please check that this is indeed a JWS if that's what you want. Case sensitivity. It's actually quite clear in the standards, but people still get it wrong. And people apparently implement block lists for algorithms. So the popular algorithm known as none is blocked. And it turns out that you can go around these block lists by playing with a case of the word none in the JOT. So we're adding some more words of warning about that, and we recommend defensive coding, so using allow lists instead of block lists. Compression, another like well-trodden way to DOS the verifier. JWE supports compression out of the box. We sort of found out the hard way that it's not a great idea. In other protocols, we still have it in JOTs, and it still can be abused. So we are adding a normative language about that. And last one, again, standards are very clear. People still make mistakes. And so we are adding normative language about rejecting JSON serialized JWSs, which are actually not allowed, but people still accept them in some verifiers. So this is it. All of these have seen CVEs in the wild. So all of them need to be addressed in a JOT security BCP. We're proposing to add them. We are not aware of anything else that's current. Maybe there's someone in the room that is aware of ongoing security research that should make its way into the BCP. Otherwise, we think the draft is in good shape. It's basically our job to implement the BCP and get it out there as soon as possible so that people improve their implementations. We do have two reviews that we received from Dan Moore and Denis Pincus. So those will be addressed. We have not addressed them yet. And we think the sooner we get this draft adopted, the better. And in fact, we would like to progress it as quickly as we can, because just by sitting on our hands, there are not going to be new security things discovered. So this is it. Comments, questions?
Thanks, Yaron. Yeah, this is an important document, so we would like to get the opinion of the room at this point. Any comments, any questions?
Yes. Aaron?
Aaron.
I sent a review in a couple hours ago, as timely as I could. Generally agree with the need for this and supportive of most of the things in it. So just left a couple of comments on the mailing list. But yeah, I think it's a good start.
Right.
I think it's worthwhile work, but I do hope you're prepared for what you're getting into, which is going to be a larger set of updates, including some of the stuff that Aaron mentioned. And having followed some of the issues on GitHub previously, like there's more work here than I think you guys are aware you're signing up for.
We don't have DIDs.
That's a good point. Maybe, maybe you should, but just offhand, a couple of things going through here, like, have you considered just getting rid of PBS2 approach algorithms, like, versus trying to protect against attacks that, I don't know, it's something to consider. There's a document out there in Jose that's deprecating the use of none and the old RSA encryption algorithms. You should probably point to that rather than restate text here, or at least coordinate with it. I'm wondering that you had the JWE, JWS confusion, and like right now there's a draft in Jose that's doing its best to make that kind of confusion even easier to fail with. So I'm wondering if you want to like proactively mitigate yours. The HPK Jose stuff, like there's an example in the text that shows claims as asymmetrically encrypted content, like a JOT. It doesn't say anywhere that this is meant to be integrity protected, but a casual reader would read it as though it's like that's what it looks like. So it sort of confounds some of the problems. There's some other problems with that. I look forward to fighting about it later in Jose. Please come. Another thing is like compression. The current text on compression is in the old document is a little bit overreaching, and there are problems, I admit, but a lot of them don't apply to contexts this uses. That's caused some implementers to drop their implementation of it, which I think is problematic for interoperability. All that's to say, I think this is important work, but I hope you know what you're signing up for.
Brian, Brian,
thank you. It's actually a good reason for this to be adopted by the working group, and then we can all work on it. And lastly, thank you for your comments, and we would appreciate issues on GitHub.
Brian, a comment on what you said on the slide 4, the JWS, JWE confusion. It's ironic a little bit that the underlying issue is something that Sophie Schmieg brought up a couple of times. It's actually not the confusion about which mechanism you use, but it's the question of you need to maintain some information about what you expect the other party to provide. This is the same as the algorithm aspect. And it repeats a couple of times in different incarnation, but I think we do ourselves a better job if we level up a little bit and say, if your implementation doesn't look back on what information, what algorithm, what context I'm using with the other party, then you can have all sorts of problems, whether this is the none issue, whether this is our switch from one algorithm to the other one, whether I'm using a totally different signature versus encryption, etc. Yep. I think this is a generic issue that for some reason is not so much a problem in other libraries, but we have sort of failed to take that experience from these other libraries into Jose.
No, I think you're right. I was just suggesting that we don't do things to continue the mistake while we're trying to fix it, or at least try to coordinate the efforts while we're making the mistake again over here, at least like work together to fix that. You also have a document in Jose that's like security practices too, don't you? That should maybe be.
Yeah, I wrote about this and people said, oh, no, it's not important.
It's actually still an open issue, Hannes, and we need to discuss it with you.
An adopted document, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so we're running out of time. So just one question. Does any of this prevent us from adopting the document?
Oh, no.
No. Perfect. Okay. Philip.
The Philip Skokan, the old JWT BCP is very much overlooked by implementers. So anything that we can do to, let's say, renew it, to bring it to light for implementers to read is very much welcome. I do welcome the fact that the vulnerabilities that we are disclosing here have, or not disclosing, documenting here have already been disclosed and fixed in at least mine and Brian's implementation, sorry. And I do welcome the work on this to continue and be adopted.
Awesome. Thanks, Philip. Brian, I closed the queue, but quickly. No.
I just
go
wanted
ahead.
to say, I did a few years back, I did a talk at a conference very much on the subject of JOT vulnerabilities and tried to give a very nuanced and reasonable look at both sides of the criticisms and what we've done wrong and so forth.
Yep.
It'd be great if people watch that are interested in the
Can
document.
you post a link to the list?
I did throw it in the, yes, I threw it
That
in the
would be
chat,
good.
but I'll do it in the
Yeah, just for the record, that's a good idea. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. We'll do a call for adoption on the mailing list. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Brian. I'm gonna get to Brian today. Stuck with him.
Thank you. What are we doing? Okay. We're in Madrid. That's a building in Madrid. I thought it was pretty. This one is to talk about OAuth, identity and authorization chaining across domains. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's the best we could come up with, and I think is reasonably accurate. The chairs look like nervous.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Keep going.
Keep going. So the general, the colors didn't come out, but I tried to differentiate between sort of two trust domains here, but at a very high level, this describes a common pattern that preserves identity and authorization information across trust domains that use OAuth 2 and does so in a way that does not involve end user interaction and approval with the authorization server. What it is a local RFC 8693 token exchange locally to get a token to facilitate an RFC 7523 cross-domain access token acquisition. This is not a new thing. It's basically describing how to use these two documents, or profiling or describing how to use these two documents together to achieve a certain end goal in a way that has been done in many places in practice, but for some reason is sort of mysterious to a lot of people. People don't necessarily make the connection that they can be used this way. And this document attempts to sort of just provide information and description about how it can be done to try to codify it. Work on this document since Bangkok, we have published one revision, 05, and I will not go through each of these, but with the exception of the very last bullet, which was the addition of a little bit more metadata to basically describe in the context of this profile what token types are supported by the local AS doing token exchange, just some metadata to help deployments, things. There are no significant or even insignificant changes here. There's no breaking changes. It's all sort of editorial bookkeeping stuff, just messing around, really. It's improvements, but it's small scale stuff. And there's one open pull request that is basically just fixing problems that's taken me years to figure out how to do with our given tool chain. It's nice, but it's not important. It's like house cleaning stuff. And there are 4 open issues, all of which are also sort of meh. Actually, one has the potential to be large, and that's to update this content to reflect the changes that Mike talked about earlier in the assertion profiles. Because of the narrowed and tightened scope of that work, the impetus and impact of this is, I'm not going to say negligible, but is significantly smaller. So I think we can just kind of check this one off with a small change. It's easy. The others are, one should probably be closed because it was a question, and the others are very, very much editorial. Oh, it was working. So at the last meeting, I'm glad there's a few laughs. God, that's all I hope for. At the last meeting, I made a comment about how It was a little derogatory in nature about some previous attempts to take this to last call. And I said, that's cute. Like it's not ready there. But my question here is, based on where we're at, based on the content of the document and the obvious sort of open and recent changes being very small and narrow in nature, I'm suggesting that it is in fact time to get cute. And to add some funness to that, I got a very not cute fish here in a restaurant from yesterday, and Arndt over in the corner being cute next to a gentleman who fell asleep in a session. He's been blocked out to protect some identities. In the meantime, Aaron Parecki has been working on the Identity Assertion Authorization Grant, which is also a hard name, but better than one we have. In effect, this document takes the identity chaining work, profiles it for a more specific and meaningful use case that right now there are, I don't have an exact number, but there are people, implementers working on deployments of this as we speak right now. So I just wanted to give Aaron credit here, and some other people have been blacked out to protect their identity. Something new in Eric's document is AI. It's now AI enabled, so it's super important. I say this with a bit of tongue in cheek, but actually the application of this work in an enterprise environment where you're enabling OAuth-based systems to obtain access tokens on a user's behalf, to do something on the user's behalf across domains in a way that doesn't require explicit end-user authorization is in fact very useful. So while this work began well before the advent of agentic AI, it becomes particularly relevant and meaningful for use in agentic AI use cases within the context of the enterprise, where end-user consent is provided effectively through your employment contract, and you don't need to then garner and get end-user consent on every transaction. It's cool. I'm not going to read you all this, but show you kind of like Aaron wrote up a blog post and did an example diagram here where showing like how this could work based off of like an AI agent having been logged into directly from an enterprise IDP. I've also blocked out the name of that IDP for non-entity there, but you may recognize it. Doing a regular SSO, taking that SSO token that it received to facilitate the end-user session, posting that back, starting an identity chaining type flow specifically with the SSO token to get a cross-domain style authorization grant. Use that to access, to obtain an access token for access to resources at some application a la Slack. So this is like showing how you can get Claude access to your Slack via IDP, sort of enterprise IDP mediated interactions. And that was a lot of words that may or may not have made sense, but it's super relevant, it's important. And I think it's interesting work that the community, the larger community, is already pursuing, in part because it's possible profiling the existing work, but I think it would still be very useful to bring some eyes, closer eyes on the work itself, and I don't know, some legitimacy, some credibility to the work by bringing it into the remit of this working group, because it's very much related. And I only had 10 minutes. So I tried to do it quickly, but before we meet in IETF 121 Montreal, which by the way is in Canada, I've recently learned this. Typical American. But I am trying to be culturally appropriate, sensitive to the Canadians, and therefore with Canadian politeness, I ask, please consider at this point a working group last call for the base level profile specification, the identity and authorization chaining draft. I and the other authors believe it's ready to go. I hope that the folks agree, and we'll find not too much stuff in working group last call, but some stuff, and actually we can get that moving forward. And I'd like us all to also please consider adopting the Aaron's profile there of the identity assertion authorization grant. Fini. Finn.
Any comments, questions? anybody feels that this document is not ready for work group last call? Oh, crickets.
The best kind of crickets.
Yeah.
You wanna-
Okay, we'll start a work group last call on this. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
You did not. We didn't say anything, so it's.
He was getting the temperature of the room to understand if he needed to get the temperature of the
You
room.
you can send a review. Dick.
Dick, do you have a comment, or you're good? Okay. And again, obviously, we'll do that work group last call, and if there are lots of comments, we can get the document back as a work group document. So it's not. It's
not the end.
Yeah, it's not the end. Yeah, just
Just
okay.
a step in the process.
Yeah.
Do you want to consider the second question, or did I
Adoption?
overstep with that?
Yeah, that's probably.
The tricky
Just think
thing
about it.
nowadays is that everyone sprinkles AI on top of their documents. So we need to sort of maybe look a little bit on like where are we with all of this. But I know that there's a lot of content in there, and we've seen that presentation before. But let's do the working group last call first. That shouldn't take too long, and hopefully we get some good reviews in. People look at that document. That will also help that to evaluate and decide on the document afterwards. But I think looked pretty good last time from the presentation. So
That makes sense. Just to clarify, he did sprinkle in AI, but it's actually legitimate content. It's not just AI washing, and there's stuff in there that's worthwhile too. So yeah.
Okay.
no, I didn't mean it in a negative way, but clearly everyone
took
is
it that way.
interested in AI. That's why we have all these site meetings nowadays, and like that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Quickly, Aaron and Peter after that.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I just wanted to respond to that AI comment. This is absolutely not a AI washing draft. It is started before the AI hype cycle. Long before that, I presented at IETF multiple times already. It is a very directly enterprise-related use case, and it is useful without any AI tools involved in the process.
It's useful on
just
both sides.
It's the reason that I brought AI into the story is because the AI use cases make the problem that it solves way worse. So the problem is amplified with AI use cases, and that is the reason for that example in the draft.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah, I second everything that Aaron's saying. Aaron's draft is highly relevant regardless of AI. Turns out it will also simplify and make things like MCP integration more secure. And I would definitely encourage folks to go read the draft. And there's already some proposals, I believe, Aaron, that you have in the MCP community to build on the previous work and ultimately also on this work. So I would encourage folks to read it and provide feedback, and I would be in favor of adoption.
Thank you. Keep going.
Hey,
Next
look,
one.
me again. Speaking of Aaron, OAuth client ID prefix is a draft that a number of folks, specifically Aaron, Daniel, and Joseph, have been working on. At some point, I foolishly said I'd be happy to present here in person because they wouldn't be on site, and I have some familiarity with the context. So hopefully I don't mess anything up. Aaron, please jump in if I do, but with that, let's go. And so I, of course, had to put my own touch on the slide. So here's another opening slide presented by me, who is present. And I did want to get this picture because I felt like it was something that Aaron might try to do because he can get up higher with his drones, but this was just from a rooftop. So it's a bit of a synergy between our styles, if you will. And with that, we'll get to the actual work. So the draft was presented originally at IETF 121, and then discussed in an interim meeting, presented again at 122. After 122, for reasons we'll discuss a little bit later, it was renamed to client ID prefix from, wow, I messed this up already. I'm doing good. Sorry, Aaron. A draft called client ID metadata document was originally presented at 121, and that described some slightly different but related concepts. It was kind of split apart and renamed to client ID prefix after 122. And here you are at 123 listening to me babble and work my way through slides that I did review, but apparently I can't read. I'll do better though, I promise. Okay, the client ID metadata document is a pretty simple concept. The client publishes their metadata using the client registration vocabulary. So all the fields described in dynamic client registration are used in a different context by publishing a JSON document that contains content based on those fields at a URL, such as, oh, that's not the URL, that's the registry. And it is published somewhere. It doesn't have to be a defined path or anything, just as a stable URL. And that URL is passed as the client ID in the authorization request, with the expectation that the authorization server on the other side evaluate that URL, go out to its location, fetch the JSON associated with it, and use that to establish the client identity, including all of its configuration parameters, its public keys for authentication, whatever, normal client metadata stuff. Noting, of course, that there's a few things that don't work, like client secret. You can't just include it on a public endpoint on the web, but otherwise that's the basic concept. That document is linked down here, this down here. It's a nice, totally useful concept that I think at least some slight variations of are being deployed by very, very large providers right now looking to get into OAuth and do so in a way that doesn't require pre-registration of clients. And pre-registration of clients is a sticky problem that we've all, some of us, a large part of the community has been wrestling with for a long time. We've had a lot of different approaches to it. I think we're going to hear about some more later, but this is one very pragmatic way to address the issue. It's useful for AI too. Here's a document. It actually is.
I swear.
Is a quick example of what it is. Like you have your, it's a client metadata document. Instead of being pushed to the registration endpoint, you go out and resolve it from a HTTPS endpoint. It has, I don't know, the client ID, which by the way has to match the client ID that you sent in to go resolve the document, and some other stuff like the redirect URLs, maybe some stuff to display to the end user to try to make it reasonable. That document again is listed at the bottom. Anyway, applicability, pre-registration of these clients is not possible in many cases, like when the client developer has no prior relationship with the authorization server, like think of an open source chat or email app connecting to a self-hosted server. The pre-relationship prior registration is maybe not impossible, but it kind of doesn't make sense. It's not practical. Apps that connect to self-hosted services, such as, I should have taken this out, Mastodon or WordPress. There's no single central server where you could even register OAuth clients. The concept just doesn't exist. Federations are an example where entities can join not through a predefined relationship bilaterally with a client and a server, but through a relationship of joining and being a participant in this federation. It establishes the relationship between the two, and then that relationship is used as a trust basis to bootstrap the other configuration information. But again, it's not a bilateral registration process. It's a larger sort of more it's a different approach to the client onboarding and registration problem that this kind of stuff could facilitate by not requiring pre-registration and having means to do that. And of course, agentic AI, I put in there while I was reviewing the slides, because it actually does help with that. Not that agentic AI is a new problem in terms of software. accessing resources on a user's behalf, but the scale and potential problems that come along with it highlight or greater highlight problems that we've already been wrestling with. That being pre-registration is a problematic speed bump in a lot of deployments. So it is actually helpful. So go on, I'm trying.
Brian, you say it's a speed bump, but it also has some benefits.
It does.
And so what do you see as the drawbacks of not requiring that relationship?
There are certainly potential security implications. For instance, things like the redirect URIs are established, normally established in a direct registration step. Here you push them out, but things like in this metadata document, they are attempted to be addressed by a hard association of the client ID and this document that you point to, logos and other things, being in the metadata described. I think previous slide mentioned that you could display, for example, the URL to the end user. I know you don't, that's not a great user experience, but you're giving the user some opportunity to understand the root of your trust in this client. So the client metadata document is a verified URL that the user could then see. That's what I'm getting the move-on approach.
You get it in the weeds.
Anyway, there are trade-offs. Some of this stuff is meant to enable it in ways that allow for at least some of the concerns to be mitigated through other processes. So, like always, trade-offs.
Yeah.
Leif.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick, and I'm sorry, I haven't actually read this, but one thing that kind of jumps out at me from the last slide is sort of the trust management part of this, right? So you're basically tying this to TLS, to Web PKI, right?
Yep. So it's confusing, and I apologize. There's two different documents in question here. The metadata document is not actually the main subject,
right.
But that one is bound to Web PKI for trust. The document I'm not getting to talking about is actually just a facility at the higher layer to help the interaction between the two in the client ID convey to the authorization server which mechanism they are interested in using for figuring out other stuff. So yes, but also separate.
Right, but I'm kind of struck by there's some similarities here with OpenID Federation, right?
Absolutely.
And when in OpenID Federation we specifically introduce a fairly complex trust management mechanism for good reasons, right? Because one of the reasons is that if you're doing massive deployments, one of the things you actually want to do is not just automate it, but you also want to automate trust to some extent. You need to be able to say this class of clients has this certain property, trust marks, for instance, right? And so I'm kind of missing those, and it would be, I think, wouldn't it be good to kind of try to align these two mechanisms?
Sorry, I need this is a great discussion. I think we might need even an interim meeting to discuss that. So happy to do that. So.
It's more. This is more than we can cover at the mic, right?
Exactly.
And that's why I got up, just to say that there's a tremendous amount of complexity hiding behind the third bullet point.
Right. Yeah.
True.
Perfect.
Absolutely true.
Brian, wrap up, please.
Okay. So the real point in this document is just to provide a way to signal which of these mechanisms is being used. And the document I talked about at the beginning is one way that they can be used. There's some description about why we use a prefix and why we call it a prefix rather than some kind of other parameter. It's been discussed actually a few times, but it's...
Okay.
Basically...
That's it. It's signaling to you something. We're running out of time, so let's continue that on an interim, Brian. Okay, we'll schedule something because you need obviously you need lots of time to discuss all of this, right? So we're not ready for adoption at this point, right? right?
Fair.
Okay. Okay. And thank you guys. Like I close the queue. There's no time for this. Sorry. Let's get going. Is it that client authentication part? Yes. This one? No. That's the only thing I see here. Oh, this one? Yeah. Okay. Let me hand it to you here. Yeah.
How much time do we have before?
You have, what is it, 10 minutes? Now, we do have time Friday, and there's an art document also that was planned for today. We can continue that discussion on
Okay.
Friday tomorrow. Okay.
I just needed to know if I needed to compress this one.
Yes, we have
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Peter Kasselman. I'm presenting this on behalf of myself and some co-authors, Dag Sniegen and Ismail Kazouzi. I'm a longtime workload identity enthusiast and also OAuth contributor. So I'm going to talk a little bit about OAuth client registration, specifically doing that with spiffy credentials. I'm going to talk, there's two drafts that we've prepared, and we'll talk a little bit about both of those very briefly. But this is really just to introduce some of the ideas and see if there's interest in the topic. So I think first off, right, why do we need automatic client registration? And why can't we just continue to do things manually by hand, as is very commonly done today? And I have, Dag, are you online?
I should be here, I think.
Yes. So maybe, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about some of the experiences that you've had with manual client registration and some of the reasons why automatic client registration is something that's of interest here?
Yeah, I mean, there's several issues, but I think the big one is operational. It just takes a lot of time to manage clients and secrets and rotating secrets and storing them securely. There's tends to be manual work, or you have to create a bunch of processes that needs to be followed. Deleting and rotating secrets, it can lead to downtime. It's just error prone.
Right. And then I think the other challenge that also comes up is that you're often operating in a heterogeneous environment. So both your organization and technology stacks can be very different. And so then having to do manual work requires work from developers, it requires work from identity administrators, and there's a bunch of coordination in the middle again that causes a bunch of sort of additional overhead, which sort of leads, to sort of delays. And I don't know, Dag, if you want to say something about the velocity.
I think it's a very good point. It's just tedious sometimes, because when you have processes, there needs to be maybe like an approval, or there's a separate person that needs to create clients, and it stops down development quite a lot.
Right, and I think the other problem that we're seeing, certainly when we're talking to customers and when we're deploying these technologies, is there's also this exponential growth, right? So this used to be a problem that you could manage manually, but now with the increase in sort of workloads, and of course AI is contributing to this as well, there's just sort of this exponential growth in more clients and more client secrets, which kind of brings us to the security problem, just in general with sort of a continued secret sprawl. And again, like Dag, I'll defer to you on this one.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like the biggest selling point, or the biggest pressing matter to work on this is secrets. They grow exponentially. If you have X number of teams, they tend to have X number of clients each, and then they have X number of secrets, and the bigger the organization, you just get more and more secrets and clients. And as we've seen in media as well now, there tends to be some old clients and secret laying around that people are not aware of. So it's incredibly difficult to manage this for large organizations, I think.
Right. And so the idea really is, can we automate this? One thing that we're seeing is a lot of folks are beginning to use things like SPIFFE. So SPIFFE is the Secure Production Identity Framework for Everyone. It's really meant to solve this bottom turtle problem. So you bootstrap credentials to your workloads without having to provision secrets. And those workloads can be, and often are, OAuth clients. It works through attestation. After attestation, there's this assignment of identifiers. Credentials are provisioned that you can now use for authentication that Arndt will talk about maybe on Friday. And then there is the ability to do this continuous lifecycle management, right? So one concern is the moment you move away from or you move towards sort of certificate-based or route-based authentication, these credentials may expire. And this is something that SPIFFE actually avoids. And you can actually deploy this at large scale, and there's open source and commercial solutions available for it. So maybe a little bit more, Doug, I think you guys have some experience with this, so maybe if you want to talk about why SPIFFE is a good option for auto-registration.
I think it just moves everything to the platform level, and it gives you the ability to look more at workloads instead of clients, and it really gives you that direct link between SPIFFE issuers or workloads and clients, so that you don't get the confusion with just too many clients, and sometimes you don't know who owns the client. But by having this link, it really makes it very clear that workloads are what you're focusing on. The only thing you need is that there has to be like kind of this trust relationship between the SPIFFE issuer and the authorization server. But it moves the responsibility from like teams and processes into a platform, which is the big benefit, really.
Right. So basically, I think the idea is that you can sort of absolve the authorization server from having to manage clients by really pushing this onto something like the SPIFFE infrastructure that's taking care of credential issuance, credential lifecycle management, and attestation and identity proofing, so that you can trust these client IDs or client credentials that's being presented. Yeah. As we've been sort of exploring this idea, there's really sort of two ideas. One of them came from a post that was done to the list back in February by Dmitry Telgin, I think. And this is sort of an approach where you really take a register on first use approach with SPIFFE. And so the idea is basically that when a client presents a SPIFFE credential, because the authorization server already trusts that issuer, it can verify the credential, and it can then just automatically sort of trust on first use and register that client ID. And so this way, there's no additional registration protocol. You don't have sort of a bunch of client IDs that build up over time. It's relatively efficient, and there's low latency. It works well for something like the client credentials flow. But when you dig into it, right, the redirect flows need some additional work because you still need some additional metadata. So you need some strategy around that. And the draft sort of talks about different options for how to manage and think about that additional metadata. I think some of this very interested also in the work that Brian and Aaron presented earlier. There might be some opportunities there as well, as we're sort of trying to solve somewhat similar problems maybe. So that is one approach. And basically, it's sort of no new protocol. It's really just this sort of trust on first use model. Another model that's come up, and that's sort of come out of a set of discussions around dynamic client registration, is to use the SPIFFE JOT as a software statement as part of the dynamic client registration protocol. So again, no need for a new protocol, but really just being explicit about how this JOT SVID is used as a software statement. So it's immediately compatible with dynamic client registration. This is dynamic client registration has been adopted by MCP. So that's a really useful thing potentially in that environment if you have a SPIFFE deployment. Of course, it's JOT only, but it could also be generalized to other credential types. And so those are sort of the two potential approaches, two sketches. We've gotten some feedback on these, but would definitely love to hear more about this. And then really sort of next steps here is, first is this idea of auto-registration of clients, something that is interesting. Are the approaches here of using Spiffy to do that an interesting approach? And if it is, please reach out, add comments, open issues, and help create PRs so that we can sort of have this sort of simple, scalable, and secure mechanism for client registration and to start getting out of the business of proliferating client secrets, which is something that Arndt will talk about in his draft about how that can be done. And we have 37 seconds for anybody if there is interest.
Peter, are you recommending that Spiffy sort of uses more OAuth, or are you recommending that people who use OAuth today borrow some concept from Spiffy?
What I'm recommending is that if you have an OAuth deployment and you have a Spiffy deployment, that we are very explicit about how you can use those two things together to simplify this registration process so that you have fewer operational overheads issues. And as a result, the work that Arndt will present, what that will then give you is also getting out of the secret proliferation problem, because that is probably one of the #1 risks with all of this this exponential growth.
Can I also just mention one thing quickly, is that Spiffy is often given in service meshes in a sort of slightly compatible way with MTLS. So you might actually have something Spiffy compatible without doing a full Spiffy deploy.
Okay, we have run out of time, so please be brief because there is a meeting after this. So, Brian.
Okay, I did not use the word create automatic connections or whatever. Sorry, I'm trying to be quick and that makes it worse. In the last presentation, I was butchering all of Aaron's content, but effectively at the root of it, we're talking about the same problem here. So I don't know what to do with that, but we need to combine or at least consolidate or synchronize efforts.
I see the overlap. I'd love to work with you on that.
Okay, awesome. Jeff.
Jeff Romado, I second the proposal here. I think that this is something the working group should work on.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Mike Jones, the term automatic client registration already has a well-defined meaning in OpenID Federation. I know choosing names is hard, but you really need to use a different name.
Yeah, neither of the drafts are named that, so, but thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
That's Mike shit after that. Joseph.
Yeah, just a quick note. I think you've divided the flows down into redirecting flows and non-redirecting flows, but that's not quite right, because if you start with pushed authentication requests, then you can fall into the first case, even though you're doing a redirecting flow.
Tony. Love to learn more about that, Joseph.
Yeah.
So I read the draft, but I don't understand how trust domains are actually established here. It didn't go into it in your document, and that's a big concern of how you're going to use Spiffy in this particular instance.
Okay.
Happy to talk about that.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, that's ours. Okay, thank you. See you all tomorrow.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. Okay, this is good.
I have to talk to Brian first before he runs away. Is it okay? I have to talk. Hi, do you need to talk right now? Because somebody else has something to talk about right now. Okay, can I help? Can I help? I chair IoT Ops now.
Yes, you finish at 1 p.m.
I'm sorry. I finished at 2 p.m. Yes. I don't know what we